In this tutorial, I'm going to show you the fastest way to pick up Python and use it to solve some real-world problems. Let's go. First thing first, let's open your editor. I'm using Google Colab here. It's a cloud-based editor and you can get the link from the description section. Or you may also use Visual Studio Code or any other editor that you have installed on your computer. First, we are going to learn how to store values using variables. So the very first thing when we use Python for data analytics, we want to store some value. So we can use it to store name equals to Lao Han, age equals to 25, married equals to false. So these are the three very common data types that we usually use, which is a string or a text, a number, and also a boolean, which is the true-false value. And when we want to execute the code, we can click on the play button or press Shift Enter. Alright, now let's say I want to store some foreign currency exchange rate. I can say Thai baht equals to 13 cents, USD equals to 4.66, Singapore dollars equals to 3.45. The same thing, press Shift Enter to execute the cell. And we can now move on to step 2, which is to process these values. Right now, we haven't seen any output here because we did not do anything. So let's say I want to know how much ringgit I will get if I change 10 Singapore dollars. So I can say MYR equals to 10 times SGD. When you run it, it won't show you anything. So if we want to see the results inside the variable MYR, we can call the print function. So we know that if we have 10 Sing dollars, when we change it at the money changer, we can get about 34.5 ringgit. And then we're going to learn how to store multiple values. And to do that, we're going to use different types of brackets. The first one is the round bracket. Round bracket is used to store values in tuples. For example, we want to store the latitude and longitude of JB. We can say lat long equals to bracket 1.527549. 103.745476. So this is the coordinates of JB. And if we want to store multiple items, let's say we want to store a list of names, then we can use the square bracket. So let's say Lao, and then Ali, Mutu. Okay, so this is how we store multiple values in a single variable using a square bracket. Later on, we'll iterate the list and use the values to make some decisions. And sometimes when we want to store our values in a more structured way, that's when we use curly brackets. For example, we can say students equals to name, Lao Han, age 25, and married, false. And now we execute this cell, it will store the value inside a dictionary called student. And if we print student, it will show us the value. And the interesting part is we can access the value using the key. So for example, I want to know the name of the students. I can just do print student square bracket name. Or if I want to print their age, so I can do it this way. This is a very handy way for us to store data in a structured way, and we can always access the values using their key. Alright, next up, let's look at how we can use what we have learned so far to solve some real-world problems. So here it is. We have a list of 3 students and their marks. We want to find out the average marks of the class and also who have failed the exam. Okay, so here's how we should store our data. We can create 3 separate student objects, S1, S2, S3. So each of them will store the student name. Edmund. So this guy is smart. He scored 87 marks. And S2, name. Okay, Dr. Lau. Not too good, but not too bad, 63 marks. And the last student, Raymond. Okay, marks, he failed, okay, so 42 marks only. And then we create a list called students, and we store these 3 students object inside. So we can say students equals to S1, S2, S3, and execute the cell. Alright, so next we want to get the average marks. Before we get the average marks, we need to get the total marks of all the students. So we can call this sum function. And what we want to sum? We want to sum the student, no S, individual student marks for each of the student in the student list. So these students represent the list of students that we have here, and this student is a variable holder to hold each student when we iterate the list. And then we want to print the total marks. Alright, so it's 192, and the average marks will be our total marks divided by the total number of students that we have, which is 3. So we should not put 3 here, because later on if we want to add more students like 4, 5, 6, 7 students, we don't want to change this number manually. So we want to get the total number of students by calling this length function, and we print the average marks. So the average marks is 64. Next, we want to find out who have failed the exam. So we can print a line saying that students who have failed the exam. And we want to iterate the list using a for loop. So we can write a for loop saying for as in students, okay, if as marks, okay, is less than 50, we will say their name. Okay, so print their name. That's it, as simple as that. So the first line, we print out a title saying that students who have failed the exam, and then we write a for loop to iterate all the students using a variable placeholder as inside the list of students. If their marks is less than 50, we print their name. So shift enter, execute this cell. And the students who have failed the exam is Raymond, because he's the only one with less than 50 marks. Alright, so that's all for this tutorial, and let's take a quick recap of what we have covered today. Now, the fastest way to learn Python, or in fact any programming languages, is number 1, you learn how to store values using variables. Number 2, you learn how to process these values using operators. Number 3, you learn how to store multiple values in a collection like a list. And then lastly, you learn how to iterate this list of collections using for loops, and then we combine it with if-else statements and our operators to make some decisions. This will cover around 80% of the use cases in our general programming tasks. And if we talk about Python in data science, we just need to combine it with other frameworks, other libraries. We can handle a lot of data analytics tasks, from gathering data, exploring data, and all the way to building models and interpret our results. If you want a copy of the notebook that I use in this tutorial, you can download it from the link in the description section. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next tutorial.